I was born to drive monster trucks. It's in my blood. It's what I dream of at night. It's what I wake up thinking about in the morning.
You know Diesel Dave as the bearded, diesel-loving half of the Diesel brothers, the guy who can make a rusted-out pickup roar louder than a jet. On TV, he's cracking jokes in flip-flops, setting trucks on fire, living the dream garage life. But behind the smoke and laughter, Dave has faced moments no stunt could prepare him for, moments where the ground seemed to vanish beneath him, and every choice felt like it could be the last. He's stared down situations that would break most people, and somehow he came back from them changed forever. This is the heartbreaking story of Diesel Dave, a man who survived the kind of challenges most of us can't even imagine. The trucks, the pranks, and the start of something big. The Diesel brothers' story didn't start with cameras rolling or TV crews following them around. It started in Utah, with two friends who weren't even brothers, Dave Heavy D Sparks and Dave Diesel Dave Kiley. Heavy D had opened a small diesel truck dealership, fixing up used rigs and selling them. But, as anyone who knows him can tell you, small never really stays small with Heavy D. Pretty soon, the builds got bigger, crazier, and way more over the top. These weren't just trucks you'd see in a workyard. They were monster creations, custom lifts, engines tuned within an inch of their lives, vehicles that looked like they had no business being legal on the road. To get more eyes on the business, the guys started filming themselves. At first, it was just simple clips, build walkarounds, burnouts, maybe a prank here and there. But as the stunts grew, so did the audience. One video blew up in a way they couldn't have planned, and before long, they were sitting on the couch opposite Jay Leno, talking about their crazy builds on The Tonight Show. That's when the Discovery Channel called. By January of 2016, Diesel Brothers premiered.
Diesel Brothers, the new season, premieres Monday, January 16th at 10 on Discovery.
And fans instantly loved it. The big personalities, the insane custom trucks, the family vibe of the shop. But like most TV stories, the parts we saw on screen weren't the whole picture. Behind the jokes and horsepower was a side of Diesel Dave's life no fan would envy. For nearly 3 years, one terrifying chapter of that story was kept completely secret. It wasn't until Heavy D posted a video with the words, "I nearly lost my best friend," that people learned what had really happened. The man he was talking about was Diesel Dave. The day the mountain tried to keep him. The ordeal started on Utah's Mount Nebo Loop, a rugged stretch of mountain road that, in the dead of winter, gets buried under snowpacks taller than a truck. In February of 2019, a massive snowcat, basically a 20,000-pound snow grooming machine, was stranded up there, and Dave volunteered to recover it before another storm closed off the pass for good. But to really understand how dangerous that decision was, you have to rewind about a year earlier, to a trip that should have just been a fun family getaway. In January of 2018, Heavy D had taken his family and Dave up to his cabin on Farmington Peak. Getting there wasn't like pulling into a driveway. The road was narrow, steep, and carved right into the side of a cliff with a 1,000-foot drop. In winter, the only way up was in a snowcat. Heavy D had two of them, a brand-new red piston bully that looked like it could chew through anything, and an older gray one. That trip was one of the first times Diesel Dave would take the controls of a snowcat himself. The next day, the families decided to push farther up the road into the most dangerous section along the cliffs. Heavy D loaded his 7-year-old daughter Charlie into the shiny new red cat, while Dave hung back in the gray one. At first, everything was fine. The machine cut through snow like a hot knife through butter. But mountains have a way of reminding you who's in charge. Out of nowhere, a drift above gave way. An avalanche slammed into the red cat, pushing it sideways until it teetered right on the edge of the 1,000-foot drop. Heavy D and Charlie froze, too scared to even move. Shutting down the engine, they carefully climbed out and started hiking back through waist-deep snow in the dark. Dave sprinted ahead to get help. When they finally made it to the cabin, they realized the second snowcat's battery was dead. After a desperate jump start, they left the kids safe inside and headed back out to try to rescue the red cat. The plan was to anchor it with the gray one, chain the two machines together, and drag the red one back onto solid ground. For a second, it seemed like it might work. The red cat started crawling back to safety. But then, with a sound no one forgets, the chain snapped. Diesel Dave was still inside when the red cat lurched sideways, spun, and disappeared off the mountain. Heavy D could only watch the headlights vanish into the black. Convinced he had just witnessed his best friend's final moments, he dropped to his knees, screaming into the snow, debating whether to climb down the cliff himself. But down below, something unthinkable was happening. Dave, who hadn't buckled his seatbelt, was tossed out when the windshield popped loose. Instead of being crushed inside the cab, he tumbled through powder, buried waist-deep but alive, shaken, injured but alive. His first thought wasn't even about himself. It was to grab his phone before Heavy D did something reckless. When Heavy D's phone buzzed and he saw the caller ID, he thought it had to be a mistake. But then he heard Dave's faint voice. "I think I'm okay." Rescuers rappelled down, dug him out, and somehow, by pure luck, his spine wasn't broken. Doctors later explained that the soft powder and the odd angle of his fall saved him. 3 days later, Diesel Dave walked out of the hospital on crutches. Fans eventually saw a version of this on a YouTube special, but what they didn't see was him sitting in the parking lot, sobbing at the sound of a diesel engine, realizing how close he'd come to never hearing one again. And if that sounds like the kind of near-death experience that would change someone's life forever, you'd be right. But here's the part you don't expect. That wasn't the last time tragedy came for Diesel Dave. The night everything stopped moving. Most people would think that if you survive something like being thrown out of a 20,000-pound snowcat tumbling off a mountain, the universe should give you a break after that. But life doesn't hand out passes. And for Diesel Dave,
the Diesel Sellers crew, and I think first thing is, last year we all met up.
The scariest chapter of his life didn't happen on a mountain road or in a machine. It happened on a quiet night in September of 2020, when his phone rang at just past 1 in the morning. And if you've ever had your phone go off in the middle of the night, you know that feeling where your stomach drops before you even see who's calling. For him, it was the call every parent hopes they'll never have to answer. On the other end, it was paramedics. They told him his 7-year-old daughter, Piper, had been in a serious crash. She had been cut out of the family's Yukon SUV with hydraulic tools and was being airlifted to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City. For a moment, he says his mind just went blank, like everything was muffled and far away, and all he could focus on was getting to wherever his daughter was. Piper wasn't just Dave's daughter to fans who had seen glimpses of her online. She was this little ball of energy, blonde curls, that gap where her front tooth had fallen out, obsessed with unicorns, but also just as into monster trucks as her dad. That night, she had been riding in the back seat on a stretch of highway through West Valley. An oncoming car lost control at roughly 70 miles an hour and clipped the Yukon. The SUV spun and smashed into a concrete barrier. The exact point of impact was the passenger side rear, right where Piper was sitting. Firefighters had to cut the roof off the vehicle just to reach her. By the time Dave got the call and raced to the scene, he arrived just in time to see the helicopter lifting her away. He jumped back in his truck and floored it, pushing through those empty, dark streets. He later said he beat the helicopter to the hospital by a handful of minutes, but that entire drive felt like silence, like the world wasn't even real around him. When doctors started listing off her injuries, the words didn't even sound real. She had a fractured skull, her aorta was bruised, one lung had collapsed, her spleen was torn, and her femur was broken badly enough that it would need multiple surgeries. And then came the part no parent can prepare for, the warning that the first 72 hours were the bleed-out window. In plain English, that meant her body could shut down at any time in those first few days. Fans didn't get a live update or one of the usual upbeat posts from the Diesel brothers' shop. Instead, Heavy D shared a single black and white photo of Dave holding Piper's hand, with the caption, "Prayers up, Piper Strong." That was all it took. Within hours, diesel forums, off-road Facebook groups, and Instagram feeds were filled with the hashtag Piper Strong. People who had never met the Kileys started sending messages, posting photos, and even organizing fundraisers. A small group of designers rushed overnight to create a logo with a pink and white ribbon wrapped around the outline of a semi-truck. So many people tried to buy t-shirts and stickers that the website actually crashed. For Dave, the hospital became home. He stayed by Piper's side for 27 nights straight in the pediatric ICU, grabbing bits of sleep in a chair with a folded shop towel for a pillow. Every few hours, nurses came in to check her vitals, adjust monitors, or change IVs. One night, things took a sharp turn. Piper's heart stopped. Security had to pull Dave into the hallway as the team worked on her. He slid down against the wall, whispering over and over that if someone had to go, it should be him, not her. After what felt like forever, her heart started again. Somehow, she fought her way back. Over the next few months, Piper endured 9 surgeries. She had to relearn how to walk, and her little pink cast ended up covered in signatures and doodles from every nurse who had cared for her. After 104 days in the hospital and rehab combined, she finally walked out, hand in hand with her dad. Doctors called it a textbook recovery. Dave called it something else, borrowed time. And while the family was trying to focus on helping Piper heal, something else was quietly building in the background, something far less personal, but heavy all the same. Old legal troubles, tied to the Diesel brothers' earliest days on TV, started catching up with them. While Piper was learning how to take her first steps again, the family suddenly found themselves staring at a financial storm so big, it could have buried everything they'd built. The avalanche of aftermath. Years earlier, during some of the wildest builds on Diesel Brothers
say their business was targeted, and this case actually had little to do.
The Environmental Protection Agency had started looking closely at the show. The guys were building trucks that were bigger, louder, and more powerful than anything else on the road, and along the way, they had modified emission systems in ways that didn't sit well with federal regulators. At the time, it felt like paperwork and red tape. The kind of thing that could be shrugged off and handled with lawyers. But those fines never disappeared. They sat there in the background, and eventually they resurfaced with a number that made jaws drop. $850,000. That kind of hit would sting for anyone, but the timing was brutal. Piper's accident had already stretched the family financially and emotionally. Medical bills piled up quickly, and the insurance deductibles alone climbed into 6 figures. And then came another twist that made things even heavier. The other driver's insurance company filed a civil suit. Their argument was that because the Yukon had an aftermarket suspension, it was somehow negligent. Imagine sitting in a courtroom, listening to people argue that a modification you had on your family car somehow made you responsible for an accident that nearly took your daughter's life. That's the reality Dave had to live through. Discovery Channel's legal team stepped in, which kept Dave from having to shoulder every piece of the legal fight. But the process itself took a toll. Depositions forced him to relive the crash in painful detail. He had to sit in front of a room full of lawyers in suits, under oath, describing the exact moment he saw his daughter pulled from the SUV. Meanwhile, court hearings didn't wait for his schedule. Some mornings, he would leave the hospital at dawn after staying overnight with Piper, drive straight to the courthouse, clean up as best he could in a restroom, and then sit down to testify wearing a blazer that still smelled faintly of antiseptic from the ICU. That kind of back and forth wears on anyone. When the emissions settlement was finally reached, it drained a big chunk of their savings, money that would have otherwise gone toward rebuilding stability after Piper's recovery. For most people, that combination, massive medical expenses and legal penalties, would have been enough to knock them flat. But this is where something remarkable happened. The community that had grown around Diesel Brothers stepped in, and not in a small way. Fans organized another round of merch. this time with shirts that said, "Still Revin'." Orders poured in from everywhere. Long-haul truckers mailing $20 bills in envelopes, welders tossing in what they could, and even high school students sending $5 bills with handwritten notes that said things like, "Stay strong, we're with you." That support wasn't just about money. It was proof that the bond between the show and its audience ran far deeper than trucks and burnouts. Dave has said more than once that he'll never forget how strangers made sure the lights stayed on during one of the darkest times of his life. By the time Diesel Brothers returned in early 2022 for its 7th season, the cast wasn't sure how to move forward. Fans expected the big truck reveals and over-the-top stunts, but the truth was that the crew was carrying scars that weren't easy to hide. Heavy D later admitted they thought about walking away completely, because how do you film upbeat, crazy shop antics when your best friend's daughter is still in physical therapy? Discovery executives were nervous too, wondering if the audience would find the tone too heavy. But the cameras rolled anyway, and what they captured wasn't a burnout or a monster build. It was Diesel Dave carefully lifting Piper, still healing, onto the tailgate of a lifted Ram. Instead of unveiling a new project, she smashed a big symbolic restore button with a sledgehammer. Fans didn't cry over horsepower. They cried watching a father buckle his daughter into a custom pink car seat, strapped into a rig sitting on 40-inch tires. Discovery executives kept every moment of it, realizing that sometimes the most powerful story isn't about the build. It's about the people who climb into the driver's seat when the cameras stop rolling. Resilience is a winch cable. If you sit down with Dave today and ask him how he got through everything, he doesn't really give long speeches or polished advice. He'll probably just hand you a greasy socket wrench and say something like, "Tighten one bolt at a time, check the torque, and then move to the next." It sounds simple, but for him, that's not just a mechanic's habit. It's how he's learned to live. His mornings start before the sun is up, usually around 4:30, when most of us are still asleep. That's when he gets Piper moving, stretching her leg with therapy bands, sometimes coaxing her through exercises she doesn't feel like doing, but always making it feel like part of a normal routine. Only after that does he brew a pot of coffee, check the inbox full of sponsorship emails, and start getting ready for the day. By 8 o'clock, he's usually at the shop. Things look different there, too. His social media used to be packed with clips of him sending trucks over dirt jumps or pulling impossible stunts with giant diesel rigs. These days, the feed feels more personal. You're just as likely to see Piper balancing on a toolbox, twirling to music while Dave quietly lines up an axle, or maybe clips of the crew working while family members wander through the shop. The work hasn't slowed down, but the way he shares it has definitely shifted, and he'll be the first to admit he's learned some tough lessons along the way. For one, safety isn't negotiable anymore. He laughs when he says it, but he actually straps into a 5-point harness even if he's only moving a truck across the parking lot, because he knows the cost of taking shortcuts. He also learned that the same diesel crowd that might poke fun at your choice of lift kit will drop everything to help when life gets hard, whether that means mailing in $5 bills or showing up at 2 in the morning when you need a hand. But his favorite analogy is that resilience isn't like a lift kit you can bolt on and be done with. He says it's more like a winch cable. Sometimes it frays, sometimes you have to rewrap it, and sometimes it even snaps. But it's still the thing that gets you out when you're stuck. He's shared that line at charity events, small church groups, and even with kids in a youth program where he teaches basic engine repair. They usually show up expecting a speech about chrome and horsepower, but they leave talking about scars and second chances. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the real lives behind the Diesel Brothers and other legends of the diesel world. And drop a comment. What would you do if you were in Diesel Dave's shoes? We'll be reading every single one.